Welcome back. How's everyone's lunch?
Do we need to mute people?
Yeah, just mute in this one.
Or mute Graham Norton?
So we've kind of moved forward the questions, observations, reflections part because Dickens coming on at 3:30. So we would love to hear from people. One of the things we noticed, like at lunchtime, we walked down to get a coffee from a lovely cafe. And one of the things we spoke about was the difference in feeling when we kind of get caught up in ideas and concepts and beliefs and the details and the kind of the stories of life compared to when we speak about something that's kind of expansive and kind of behind and before all of that. Like, not in a judgment way, but we get to feel it in our bodies. Like, I know there's certain conversations that I don't have from a neutral place because I've got a lot of opinion about or a lot of belief about. And then there's other conversations I don't have a huge amount on my mind and I can kind of listen to both sides in a really neutral way. And I think that's something that I found really helpful to become aware of. And like we were saying earlier, that our feeling is often a guide. Like, I know when I'm starting to get agitated or urgent or really just need this person to see my point of view, that's got everything to do with my mind and nothing to do with the situation. And I think it's quite a helpful thing to start to notice about ourselves is that we can have any conversation from a place of neutrality, even if the other person has completely opposing views. And that is our potential when we put aside for a moment our beliefs, our opinions, our concepts, our ideas, and listen with an open mind. And it's one of the things you'd been realizing with the kind of conventional view right now and the kind of the mainstream view and the alternative view of the corona stuff. Like, if you're one side and you're so lost in that, you can't hear the other side. And if you're lost in this side, you can't hear this side. And if you stand in the middle, you can listen to both and you can be open-minded and recognize that we don't know. But the feeling that we get when we cling on to our beliefs and what we think we know is a really good indicator that we've kind of got lost in the concept. And it's not telling people not to have beliefs.
No.
Like, please don't hear that in what I'm saying. Like, we live out of belief. And I was saying to Dave, like, I came across this when I was 23, and then probably I was at a conference when I was like early 30s, and on one of the breaks someone came up to speak to me, and I was kind of found myself backing away and kind of being very quick. And then I realized I heard the thought, the invisible belief that I lived out of completely unconsciously. I'm not that important. People don't really want to be talking to me. I should probably be really quick so they can talk to someone more important. And I hadn't seen it before. And then I realized how and why people often thought I was a little bit aloof.
I thought you were aloof. I thought you were rude.
You thought I was stuck up.
Stuck up.
But actually, it was from me feeling like there's someone more important for you to be speaking to. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'll quickly get myself out of the way. And when I saw it, the rest of that conference, like, there were certain sessions I missed because I just got lost in conversation with people. And I stopped assuming that I knew what other people thought or felt or whether or not they wanted to be in my company or not. And I realized people can make up their own mind. Like, if they don't want to speak to me, they don't have to speak to me. But I hadn't seen that. And I'd been around the principles at that point probably nearly 10 years. And I think that's the thing. We live in a sea, in a world of thought and belief. Some of it's visible to us, some of it's invisible. And the nice thing is that we don't have to try and figure all of that out and try and find the beliefs that keep us stuck. Like, I've loved just the falling away, like in the metaphor of the tunnel with the bricks. Stuff just starts to fall away. It just does, because you're starting to take this limitless potential of thought and see it for what it is. It becomes less serious, and then we're gifted new thoughts, new ideas. Stuff is uncovered for us. And I think that's the part of this where there isn't anything to do. So I think just to notice in ourselves, like there'll be certain topics we will get that feeling of we're not neutral on it. And I've said to Dave, there's certain conversations we just don't need to have, because right now I can't see it any other way. And you've seen it for yourself. Like, I've been aware, if I can see that Dave's caught up in something, that's not the time to try and point out you're really caught up in something. You're in your ego. But there often is an opportunity later on, or you see it for yourself, or there's no need because we've just moved on. And that's how natural and kind of everyday this is, because it's been happening throughout our lives. And there are certain things that we think are small things, but actually over a lifetime, they're huge. Like, I remember a lady once coming back on day 2 of a 3-day training saying, we said, oh, has anyone seen anything or had insights? And she said, oh, I went for lunch on my own today. And I was like, oh, cool. And everyone was like, yeah. And I was like, that's amazing. Like, is that the first time that you've been for lunch on your own in a restaurant? She said, yeah.
She describes it as a small insight.
Yeah. She thought it was a small thing. And it's like, times over a lifetime, you starting to be comfortable in your own company, not freaking out that people are going to think you haven't got any friends or there's something wrong with you. Like, you sat in your own company and had a meal and you enjoyed it over a lifetime. So that thing that seems like a small insight isn't small. And I think it's very easy to think that we haven't seen enough, or we want the big insight.
I think this is a really important point. This is not about getting anywhere. This isn't about getting anywhere. We're not striving for some perfection. Okay? Seriously important point. If you're listening to this thinking this will make me X, I want this to make me Y, forget it. Please forget it. Please forget it. It's a total distraction of the mind. It's a concept. It's an idea. It's a belief. If we're looking at this will make me. This won't make us anything. It can't. If you're looking for perfection, we're all already it. Okay? Everybody, no exceptions, is already the ultimate perfection in disguise. What is the disguise? The disguise is all the beliefs we carry around, all thoughts. The disguise is made from thought. The imperfection is made from thought. It's all thought. Okay, so this isn't about getting anywhere. It's an unraveling, it's an unveiling, it's a realizing.
So has anyone got any questions or anything they'd like to share?
Yeah, I'd like to share about earlier. Excuse me, pair of socks coming in. You what?
The internet's terrible. Can you go on Ewan's wife hotspot?
Could you put your hotspot on you? Two seconds.
Can we come back? We'll come back.
Get on it.
Anybody else that wants to say anything?
To show up. If you go onto the thing, the internet thingy, and then it'll come up and just use it.
Give me 1 second.
Okay, shall I share something while we're waiting?
Okay, think.
Lisa, we're going to go to Claire and then come back to you whilst you sort this out.
Oh, okay.
Are you there? Right, Lise, go. No, Kate,
Said-
go.
You just said Lise go.
Kate, go.
You confused me. I'm not quite sure how to put this into. So what I was thinking was, I stopped watching because I took Georgia to hockey this morning. So I stopped watching when someone asked about trauma, and you know the fact that I slightly stopped at that point, but I sort of heard a little bit about that it was something about some scientific bit, and you were starting to talk about consciousness, but at that point I had to go, and I was thinking in the car, I was thinking, well, I would leave that for Dave, you know, to Dave to explain, because I wouldn't be able to answer that question, because, you know, it all gets really complicated when you start talking about sort of science and the brain, and I don't know enough about that. And then I thought, well, that's a bit limiting, you know. I can only explain, I can sort of still share this in my way. I'm never going to share it like Dave shares it. And I was thinking back to I was thinking back to sort of things that had happened like in my life that I would look back at. And this is the thing, I find that we make this so complicated, and we start looking in our intellect and start trying to work things out and unravel things. And that's when I think, oh, well, I can't explain this, because I'm then in my intellect thinking I need to use my intellect to try and work this out and explain it to someone. And then I was thinking about actually the simplicity for me around this is that, you know, if I think back to traumatic experiences that I've had, you know, so like I've talked about when Dad died and he suddenly got ill and he ended up taking his own life, and it was traumatic. Of course it was. But if I don't think about it, I'm not feeling it. And then someone might say, well, you're in denial or whatever. But it's like, once you see, this is where the three principles for me comes into. You have to look at all of it. You have to look at the whole, because it's only, you have to, there's this, because I now have this knowing that I'm a spiritual being, you know, we can't leave that bit out. That is integral, you know, it's all a whole. And because I know that I'm a spiritual being, I'm less attached. I know that I'm not my experience. It's like, why do I need to think about that? Why would I think about that? You know, it's not like I'm trying not to think about it. I don't do anything. I just don't think about it. And it's not like I'm trying not to, and I look at sometimes, and Pete, turned out, this was a bit bizarre, but Pete's dad also took his own life, which was a bit weird when we found that out. And Pete was 8 years old, and then he got sent away to school. Now that was traumatic. And I remember thinking, well, at some point this is going to rear its ugly head. You know, there's something's going to happen, because this has happened. This has been a trauma in Pete's life. And people, you know, would sort of imply that, well, that, you know, this is going to define it. You know, this is going to come up at some point, because it's going to have affected him. You know, we have this sort of feeling that we have to go into the past. Say it again?
Or that we can bottle things up.
Yeah, or we're not dealing with it, or we're bottling it up, and actually none of that is happening, because then we're forgetting the perfection of our design. And we are naturally, things happen to us and then we bob up to the surface again. You know, we are designed, we're spiritual beings, we're designed for life. You know, we're designed to cope, we're designed, you know, and then we're always doubting this design, and we're going back and we're going, well, you know, I can't be okay because that happened to me. Well, you are okay. You know, once you see that you're a spiritual being and you've got whatever you're going to call it God, you're going to call it divinity, it's running through you, then why would you you can't be broken. You're not that experienced. So although, I can't go into the, I wouldn't be able to say to someone about the, how it works and how the consciousness and how the science and but I can just say that, well, if you don't think about it, you don't feel it. And then in the break before, I was listening to Dave's mum when she was talking about and this is the perfection again. Dave's mum was talking about how, what it was like, Dave, when you went into prison, and how, and as soon as she started to talk about it, she started to feel it. And she said, I'm starting to feel quite shaky, and because it was a big thing when that happened. And if she thinks about it, she feels it. But she knows she's not going to live thinking about the time that you went to prison. You're not in prison now. And actually, a lot of good maybe came out of, I don't actually regret the experience that I went through with Georgia and that whole struggle. I'm really thankful for that, because look where I am now. I'm where I am now, and my life now is so different than before that I'm so thankful for that experience that I went through with Georgia. And I'm not going to dwell on how awful it was, because why would I? A lot of this is just common sense. It's like we have free will. We can think about something and we can feel it. And we don't have to think about it. And that doesn't mean we're in denial. And it doesn't mean that we are bottling it up and we're, it's just, when Georgia had a traumatic experience when she was about 11, and when we had CBT, what they wanted to do was to talk about it and to change her thinking about the experience. They kept drawing maps and diagrams about how we could change the thought and change, rather than, it's finished. You don't even think about it. Why think about it? Why trying to change it? It's just, but we seem to want to make life so complicated. And that would be my answer.
That's beautiful, love. And this is one of the this is one of the things. It's like, when you start to get eyes for this, you start to become aware that what appear to be problems are ultimately learnings. It's where we're not awake in a certain aspect of ego, awake to a certain aspect of ego. And as you spoke about that, you spoke about the gratitude you found for the hard times. So many people really resent their hard times. They resent them. They live in resentment towards their heart. I shouldn't have happened to me. Why did that happen to me? There's Leanne on at the moment. We just literally clicked her on, from South Africa, and we worked with Jessie, her daughter, 12 years old, in February, started getting anorexia, got down to a seriously low weight. We learnt a lot through talking to Jessie, and Jessie came out of her anorexic state, and she's now at a healthy weight. But one of the things I remember Jessie saying was, Mum, I am so thankful I have been through this, all of this. I'm so thankful it happened.
I'm blessed.
I'm blessed that it happened. I'm blessed I got anorexia. We were like, wow, Jess, if you can go through your life finding gratitude for the hard times, what can possibly stand in your way? If you can approach the hard times not as something to be completely and utterly feared, but when we start to become aware of it, it's almost like, what am I going to learn at the end of this? What is the possibility at the end of this? And we start to judge, we start to see life differently. I just wanted to drop in one quick story, and then we'll go to Lisa, about when we were in South Africa, in Nepal, sorry, and we went to Jen and Rudy, her ex-husband, and myself, we went out to Nepal after the earthquakes. Was it 11 weeks after? Oh no, it's
3 weeks.
3 weeks after, sorry, after the earthquakes in Nepal. And I remember I went, and where I live in Staveley, there's loads of big outdoor company headquarters, North Face, Marmot, Montaigne, Haglofs, Merrill, your big outdoorsy companies. They're all based in my little village for some god unknown reason. So I went round them and I asked for things, and would anybody be prepared to donate to equipment, because the monsoons are coming and there's people without homes. We had about 400 or 500 quid worth of stuff, jackets and things donated, so we took them out, and I didn't know where to give them to, so I carried them round with me for bloody ages until I found the person or the group that I thought, I want you lot to have this. And Mahima, our friend, who she took her driver, took us to a village which had been absolutely annihilated just outside of out of Kathmandu. And we're walking around there, you know, and we're walking in with our ideas of, oh, earthquake, lots of death, destroyed homes. This is coming back to trauma again. And our perspective on trauma. And I remember we were walking around there, and whilst we were there, there was this tiny little dog, wasn't it? Cutest little thing. Looked so scared. And Jen and I were stroking this little dog, and as we were stroking this little dog, there was this, we were outside this house where the roof was the only thing really kind of holding on, and the top tier of the double-story house, the bottom had completely not fallen out, and the house was hanging, like, hanging. The house was hanging, the roof and the...
Some beams they put in, didn't they?
Yeah, like, it was just fucked. And out of this house skipped 3 girls on the way to school in the whitest shirts you've ever seen. They skipped holding hands, chatting and laughing from one rock to the next, through the mud, through the mud, through the mud, through the mud. The stupa, the Buddhist stupa that they had in the village was completely and utterly knackered. They had a photograph of it now. And as we were walking around, there was this little bamboo building with a corrugated iron roof. And I stuck my head in it, and there was an old man in there. And I walked in, I said, may I come in? He said, yes, come in, come in. With my bag of things.
And the driver was translating for you, I think.
Was he translating? Right. 15 beds made out of pallets with mosquito nets in this little building. And I asked this man his name. He told me his name. I couldn't pronounce it. I said, oh, you're home? My home, Mom, my home, my home, my home. It's gone. No one spoke English. Did he not?
I don't think so.
And he pointed to a pile of bricks. A little pile, neatly stacked, cleaned off bricks. And that's what most of this village was now, was a neatly stacked pile of cleaned off bricks. My home's gone. I was like, I'm so sorry. I said, would you please take this? And he said, I said, I'd like you to have this. And he didn't look, he just pushed it back and said, no, no, thank you. I said to him, no, please, I would really like you to have this. This is worth a lot of money. You can take down to Tamil and sell for a lot of money. The average wage in Nepal at that time was $2 a day. I said, please take it. And he pushed it back. And he just looked me dead in the eye and he said, we have, put his hand on his heart, and he just said, we have everything that we need. Thank you. They had nothing. But I knew that he was right. I absolutely knew that he was absolutely right. He had everything that he needed. It wasn't in material things. It wasn't in the past. It wasn't in the future. He was all right, in spite of losing friends and family and his home. He was all right. And he looked me in the eye and he showed me that. I remember I walked out of that building and I walked up to you and I burst into tears. I saw how much I was still holding on to things, ideas, things that keep me safe. The idea that I wouldn't be able to cope if. That man showed me it's nonsense. He had everything that he needed and he had nothing. He had a pallet for a bed. He was all right. trauma is in the eye of the beholder. Old saying, love is in the eye of the beholder, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So it's trauma. It's not to belittle trauma. It's not to belittle it. I'm not belittling it. It's just that if an individual can wake up and realize it's a thought when it's remembered, it's a memory, you start to see past the illusion of it. Lise, are you sorted, love? Is your internet good?
Yeah, no, I'm good though.
Yeah, no.
It's like
It's gone again.
I've tripped.
Oh, okay. Is there any questions?
Gone.
Sorry, Lou. It was really crackly, that. Carolina has her hand raised.
Hello.
Never done
I
that.
really love that story. I absolutely loved it. And it made me think of with Wayne, we have two cats that probably you have seen during the morning. So the boy, who is Ginger, we had another cat who looks nearly identical coming into the house, and they were having fights, and the cats were quite scared, and so we put a cat flap that has chip recognition. So now only the two cats that we have at Wayne's can come in. But what happened is the boy Concord, who looks very much like that cat, since then looks at the reflection in the evening on the windows, or goes past the oven or a mirror, and hisses and has a moment of he freaks out, and so he gets all on guard, and that was beautiful to see, because on one side was, well, silly Billy, it's you never had a problem before with your reflection, now you do, so okay, so human beings, cats, and this is really like universal. It was such a lovely metaphor to see for us. Then I started building a case in my head, thinking, do we need to do something, because the cat is traumatized? And I just started thinking, the cat is fine. There's no such a thing as the cat is traumatized. So eventually he realizes in no danger. And the nice thing is that Wayne and I cannot sit him to watch Sydney videos, or ask him to read the missing link, or try to tell the cat that it's only just its own thinking. So, but we know the cat is fine. So, not so easy to see when we are making up all that thinking. When we are scared of our own thinking reflected on something else. But now that we can see what Concord is doing, bringing that wisdom for us to see, is so brilliant.
Lessons everywhere.
Yeah.
And I love that. You see, this isn't just a human thing. This isn't a human psychology. What we're talking about is not a human psychology. It's a universal point. The cat too is experiencing what it believes in the moment. Thank you, Caroline.
Yeah, thank you.
Wend, you've got your hand raised.
Yep. Hi there. Can you hear me? Okay, great. I love the fact that you're calling me Wend. Nobody calls me Wend, and I like it very much. Thank you. One of the best parts of this whole conversation today and all times about the principles is the how every human being can connect dots and tie threads to what you said. So I'm a nurse by training and by practice and background, and another angle at that wisdom that you just dispense with, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and trauma's in the eye of the beholder is absolutely true. And as a nurse, I used to work in a hospital that had a particular floor that was dedicated to private pay patients. So people that could afford to pay out of pocket above and beyond their insurance here in the US could go there, and they would get real china on their trays for their dinner, and they'd get little tiny glass salt and pepper shakers, and they would get, I don't remember all the other trappings, but there was fewer patients to nurse ratio and all that stuff. And so every once in a while I would get to float it up there, meaning they didn't have enough staff so that they needed another nurse, and I got to go up there, and other nurses that on the regular floor that I worked on were like, oh, I'm glad you can go up there, those snotty people, those awful people. And they said, oh, they've got a broken leg and they need salt and pepper shakers, where we're working down here with the cancer patients who are really miserable. And I remember even then as a young woman, way, way, way before the principles, thinking, the person with the broken leg, they're in pain, they're sad, and they're worried. I guess, I don't really know what they're thinking, and if they can afford glass salt and pepper shakers and a piece of nice china and a teacup, and that's going to help them get through it, okay. There was this sense of some sort of like other people, nurses, doctors, would really know who was really suffering and upset in the world. And I remember being so struck with that, saying every person's entitled to have their own perception, their own experience of what they're going through, and it's not mine to judge. Now, obviously, if there was a burning fire and somebody was in the home, I would go in and get the person in the burning fire if I could, rather than the person standing on the lawn getting scared. Like, I would probably attend to the person in the fire, but in the moment, to judge somebody else's experience as being not worthy enough for them to be fretting, I found really distasteful, and I would sort of try to bring that into any opportunity I had to teach other nurses how to be nurses, or whatever it was, that we're here to aid somebody that feels they're in a bad spot. We're not here to judge whether they're literally are in a bad spot. So anyway, that just struck me, and I've never heard, traumas in the eye of the beholder, but that whole experience that I just shared with you could be viewed as, I could have just gone back to my own floor with the nurses who were distasteful of the other patients and said, trauma's in the eye of the beholder. It would have been a much simpler conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. I love that. There's actually a whole book kind of written on that subject, which Keith Blevins put me onto, called Individual Differences in Post-Traumatic Stress Response. And it shows how, it could be something that's seen this huge trauma, and for some reason the person seems really resilient in the face of it. And then something that seemingly seems like a smaller trauma, they seem very distressed by it. And it was a whole book showing that it isn't the event in itself. The book doesn't know the principles. And I think when Keith came across it, he actually got to meet the author, and he was so excited. He said he'd probably put her off because he's like, the principles is the answer.
Yeah.
Like, what Uncovered is showing how we have those individual differences in how we respond to trauma and stress.
Yeah.
It completely put her off, but he was like, I've got the answer, because the book is just a question, like, what is it? What is the differentiator between
and you said, and I know what it is. And she said,
Yeah.
great. I'll look that up. Thank you.
It couldn't possibly be as simple as thought.
No, right? No.
How could it possibly be as simple as thought? No, it has to be something far more complicated. It has to be genetics. It has to be this. It has to be that. It has to be cells. It has to be all kinds of things. And or could it possibly be as simple as thought?
Beautiful.
What a beautiful! I'll tell you what, that hospital was lucky to have somebody with so much empathy in that moment.
Thank you.
So lovely that went. And thanks for letting me call you by your short name, because I am one seriously lazy person.
Mm.
I'm trying to shorten Alice's Al. Yeah, although
That's
There's-
okay, Da. No problem, Da.
yeah, that's it. God damn. I just shortened it to me. Oh, thank you, lovely. We've got 2 more people with their hands raised. Oh, it's Wayne. 1 more person with a hand raised. 1 more person with a hand raised. Wayne.
Hello.
Hello.
For me, when you were saying about the pain in the eye of the beholder and everything, what came to me was when I was younger, I had a couple of operations on my legs, and the pain I experienced, or what I remember of the pain, was excruciating. I had my legs in plaster for about 8 weeks, couldn't move them, was just completely in pain, was on morphine, everything. I remember at one point my mum came to the hospital to see me, and we were having a conversation, and she asked me a question, and then 10 minutes later I'd answer it. I was that doped up on morphine. And then probably about 2.5 years ago, I had my gallbladder out, and I remember saying to Carolina, I was petrified about going into hospital, because what I remembered about the last time I went into hospital to have an operation was the pain I was in with my legs. And for me, seeing it now, it was just the relationship I had from when I was younger to 2 years ago. So for me, the trauma of having my legs in plaster and being out of action for 8 weeks, or, and the pain, to now, it was just the relationship I had between the two was completely different. But in that moment, it was like, oh my God, here we go again. I'm going to be in so much pain. But I was fine. And for me, it was just, as we were talking, it was just so kind of like, wow, yeah, the relationship we have to the traumas we have is just thought.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Wayne, man.
Thanks.
Again, could it possibly be that simple?
Can I just say one sentence on that? Am I muted?
No, Wayne.
But I remember when with my dad, when he was ill, what he would do is he said it felt like he had a cheese grater across his chest, and I would say to him, I said, does it feel like that now, Dad? And he said, no, but it's going to be like that tomorrow. And I said, but are you okay now? And he says, yeah, I am okay now, but I'm not going to be tomorrow. And he was, so basically he was living, although the pain, the pain would come and go, it was like he lived it every single day, because when he wasn't physically in the pain, he was thinking about the pain coming back again. Yeah. And it was so real, because he didn't know that where it was coming from, that it was, none of us had this understanding that, it just carried on like that. It was just, that's what it was. And he just lived in that thought and fear of the pain coming.
It's the fear of the unknown.
Yeah, Because that's a beautiful point, that one. Could you tell a bit about when you people have probably heard this
Yeah.
before, but it's a really important point.
So when I was in the middle of going through my breakup with Rudy, I was filming a business training. So it was Ken and Robin, so Ken Manning and Robin Charbit, and I was filming it. So I didn't really think I had to do anything or be present apart from do the filming. And then on the second day, they asked me to demonstrate an activity that they were going to do with the group. So I was like, oh God. So then they said, right, we're gonna put people in threes. We're gonna have person A, B, and C. And Jenny, you're going to be A in this example. What we want you to do is talk about something that's a problem for you for 1 minute. And then what we're going to do is talk about it as if you're not there. We're not trying to solve it or fix it. More just like we've heard a conversation maybe in a supermarket. We've walked past and then we're just going to have a bit of a discussion about it. So I kind of completely put on the spot, and I just said, well, I'm in this massive unknown at the moment. I don't know what's happening with my career. I don't know what's happening with family. I don't know where I'm going to be living. Like, everything's up in the air. Like, everything's so unknown. And I'm kind of, yeah, I feel completely freaked out. And that was all I could spit out. I was so nervous speaking. And then I got to get back behind the camera again. And so then they sat there and started speaking. And very quickly, like maybe the second or third thing one of them said was, oh, isn't it interesting that she thinks she's living more in the unknown now than she normally is? And it was like it just hit me like a ton of bricks. We live as if things are known, and we live as if our security or our safety is born or built from knowing things, having things in place, knowing where I live, knowing what I was doing with my work, knowing that I was married, and knowing this, and all of my security had been placed on things, and I thought that they were known things. But actually, if you'd asked me 2 months before that moment, would it be possible that in 2 months' time this is the situation you're going to find yourself, I'd have thought that was impossible. So I thought then I was living in the known and I was totally secure in my known reality. And then suddenly it changes. And I think the realization that we're always living in the unknown. So people can say they're scared of the unknown, or they're not living in the unknown. But it's like that's science fiction. It's not real. Like we don't know. Like, could any of us predicted this like 2020 like year? Like, one of the kids we worked with last year was absolutely terrified about their exams. And it ended up being that they couldn't take the exams in the way, and it was kind of went on mock results.
We actually said to them, how do you know you're actually going to take your exams?
How do you know you're going to get really nervous before you
And we didn't know
walk in?
anything about this. But how do you know how do you know it's actually going to happen? Well, it's bound to happen. I think that's it, you know.
And I was just saying, one of the things I heard Michael Neal speaking about the unknown, and he said, the thing is, the unknown is unknown. So how could we be afraid of it? What we're afraid of is our made up what the unknown is, which is actually known because we've made it up. And you see how real what we think becomes. So we think we're afraid of the unknown, but we're not. We're afraid of what we think the unknown is, which isn't an unknown at all.
When it's such an important point. If you look at any of the films that we watch, like an alien film, for example, what do the human beings do that do not understand the aliens? They want to destroy them. Let's kill them. Why are people afraid of ghosts? Not because of the unknown. You see, like, we're afraid of what we don't understand. People are afraid of life. People are afraid of death. There's this saying that knowledge is power. That's a double-edged sword. What we know gets us into trouble. Back to that fruit of the tree of knowledge. It can become a burden. It can become something that we defend, something we're prepared to fight over, something we're prepared to destroy others over. But one of the first questions we like to ask people who come and work with us is, okay, so you have this aspect of your life that you want different. First of all, we want to know, what is life? What is this mad existence? What is this thing we know, we think we know something about? What is experience? What is reality? This thing we're idly all just bumbling our way through, making up stories about and thinking we know something about life. What is life fundamentally? What is it in its rawest form? What is it? What is it? What is the foundation of it? This is where people who've come across principle go, oh, it's mind, consciousness and thought. Okay, what's that? What is mind? What is consciousness? What is thought? What is this force that we never invented, but enlivens and allows us to invent? Enlivens and allows us to create, enlivens and allows us to experience, enlivens and allows us to love, enlivens and allows us to fear, enlivens and allows us to believe, enlivens everything. It is everything. There is no thing without it. What is that? We're so busy looking at the details of life, the thoughts, the feelings, that he said, she said, that they did that, they're doing this is going to happen, that's going to happen, that won't happen. We're so busy looking at the details of life. Very few people are stopping to ask the question, what is life? What is this? Anybody finds the answer to life? What is life? If at any point somebody finds that they find the source of life, I can absolutely guarantee they will say, I cannot talk about that because I do not know what it is. And that is what we all are. We are so vast. Our essence is one that is so vast, it cannot be explained, and that's why science, it's not included in science, because it cannot be explained, it cannot be quantified, it cannot be rationalized. Life itself cannot be rationalized. Consciousness cannot be rationalized. Thought itself cannot be rationalized. Any rationalization is always a consequence of thought, what the brain's doing. What's telling the brain to do what it's doing? That's the bit we need to get interested in. Because when we start to explore that, what is the energy that enlivens the being, enlivens the brain, fires the neuron, builds the neurological pathways. What's the energy that's doing that? Rather than looking at what it's creating, what's created, what's creating it? And you will realize its infinite intelligence, infinite source, undying power. Taken form, in the form of ourselves, the grass, the insects, the fungus, the bacteria, the sun, the moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Andromeda galaxy, whatever bloody hell else is in this mad experiential existence and in the world of form. It's all that. And it's inside. It's inside everything, and it's inside us. It's where it all comes from. Inside out. That word inside out, people go, oh, it's inside, out, inside, inside, inside. Inside is before the formation of this reality we are experiencing now. This is the out part. The reality we are experiencing now is the out. It's not out there. It's this reality that we're experiencing now, this mad experiential magic expression of consciousness. This is the outside. The inside is the source of all sources, the energy of all energy, the soul of all souls, the beingness of all being. That's what we need to get interested in. We need to, rather than trying to fix the details and looking at the details, if anybody finds truth, truth is that behind, that's the inside. Anybody who finds truth is set free instantaneously because they've seen through the veil of reality. They've seen it is as simple as it is all an expression of something we call thought. That's a word, it's a noise. The force itself that enlivens, that creates, that brings insight, that brings knowledge, brings guidance, beats the heart. It's called consciousness, it's called mind, it doesn't matter, it's called God. It's called Tao, it's called Allah. It's called Jehovah. Hashem. Christ, it's called Christ. Jesus was a man, Christ was what he realized. They called it Christ back then, they realized Christ. That's why it's called Jesus Christ. Christ wasn't Jesus, Jesus was the man. Christ was the space of consciousness that he discovered existed at the heart of all things. And then he tried to tell people, inside of you, there is a place called heaven. Or God's domain, the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is inside of you. It is always inside of you. That's what he tried to tell people. There is this space called consciousness that exists within you, and it's infinitely beautiful and infinitely creative. And it's the only thing that's actually taking place. It's the truest of truths. It's the realest of reals. This reality we experience now is an illusory state of it, of the true reality that exists at the heart of all being. It doesn't go anywhere. It was there when we were born. It was that created the idea of what we liked when we were 5, and now we're 35, 45, 55, 65, 75, 85. It's creating what we enjoy now, what we dislike and what we like. That beingness, that wholeness never went anywhere. That's the bit to get interested in. Our problems, they're illusions of this. Forget it. Forget looking at the problems. The problems don't exist when we're not thinking it. Problems don't exist when we're not thinking problem. But the essence of source does. We get caught up in the details. We want to change reality because we've become afraid of it, because we don't, as Wayne so rightly put, we don't understand it. And the moment somebody gains realization into it, something beautiful happens to them. Their fear dies. And that's why another name that Jesus was given was the living one. Because he found life and he started to live. He found life. We're all alive. We can all find life. It's not something special to people who have realized or enlightened. It's not something special. It's just all that happened was they realized behind their ego is this source, and we are all it. The ego is just the illusion. All the stories we tell ourselves, all the beliefs we carry that shape and flavor our realities. That's all story. Forget the story. Stop looking at the story. Become aware of what life really is. It's a magical display of consciousness. Become more interested in that, because there you start to find wholeness. If it's trauma we're experiencing, it's a magical display of consciousness. If it's joy we're experiencing, it's a magical display of consciousness. When our mind changes, our realities change. Something that was once impossible becomes possible. And all that happened was a shift in mind. A new thought was born that did away with an old one. A new wave emerged within the mind. We're so busy looking at the waves, so distracted by waves. Very few people consider the ocean of the mind. So busy with the details of what's possible, what's impossible, trauma, pain, past, time, anger, good, depression, right, bad, possible, impossible, addiction, future, past, whatever. We're so distracted by all that stuff. Of course we are, because we don't know any different until we do.
I just wanted to, there's a question which I'll try and sum up a bit. It's almost getting stuck in patterns, and it's, you know, we don't know what the future holds, but there's certain patterns that seem to happen, and it happens again and again and again. So you can predict that you think it's going to happen again. It's almost like a cycle. And wanting to know, I think it's kind of almost wanting to know how to maybe change someone else.
Good luck with that.
The thing is with this is we can't change anyone else's reality. We can't change anyone else's behaviour. But I do know, and a bit like Lee and Lou said, if one person starts to show up differently in the same situation, the situation has to start changing. We can only see this for ourselves. And I think if we're listening for something that's going to help someone else, like, good luck with that. Like, we have to listen to this for us. And we have to allow ourselves to see something new. The only way we can keep repeating patterns is if we keep thinking the same thing. But luckily we're connected to this infinite source, this intelligent source of new thought, new ideas, inspiration, insight. And if we get interested in that within ourselves and stop looking at the situation or the person or wanting something to be different, the problem in the world, we're more likely to start finding solutions of how to deal with things. Because I think sometimes it can sound like we're saying there's nothing to do. So I know that in some of the projects out in America, there would be like a lot of abusive relationships, a lot of abuse with kids and violence. What Roger Mills went in and did, and then with the Centre for Sustainable Change with his daughter, they went into so many different projects. What they did is they went in and taught people about the nature of their own mind. He didn't teach people how to deal with a violent partner or a child that misbehaves or addiction or the drug dealers. Like, he didn't teach them how to deal with those things. He knew that if he could teach them the nature of their own mind and remind them that they're connected to this intelligent source, they would start showing up different in the world. They would start making different choices. And like one of the projects that in California, I think it was Homestead Gardens, the community got together and made wanted posters for all the drug dealers. And in the end, the drug dealers either left or they handed themselves in. And the community started to change. And like, this was a community where they used to just dump bodies there because they knew that they wouldn't really have too much attention paid to it. It was such a violent place. And it seems like, again, too simple, but I think that's why I love learning from Roger Mills, because he would go into some of the worst communities and some of the most violent places and teach people about their mind. Teach people about the intelligence and the health that exists within them. Let them wake up to that, and then let them change their community. Let them change their relationship. And you know, and sometimes, like one of the stories, I think it's in the Modelo book, which is one of the first projects, was that a mother got a phone call from the school saying that her son had been found with a knife in his bag, or in his locker or something, and she was furious. And then even a few hours later, when he got home from school, she was still furious. And she said, what I normally would have done, I'd have normally beaten him. She said, but I had enough about me to know to tell him to go to his room and wait. So she waited until she calmed down, and then she had a conversation with her son, and he kind of opened up and admitted to her, I've been being bullied, and I wasn't going to use the knife, I just wanted to show them it, because then they'd be scared and they'd leave me alone. And this woman was so grateful to have learned what she'd learned, because otherwise she would have just beaten him, because that's just what she did.
It's like that little girl, remember, with the baby. put the stuff out the drawers.
Oh, yeah. I'm just aware of time.
Oh.
We'll just have a 15-minute break because Dickon's going to be joining us at past. So I want to make sure we're all on ready at past. So
It's 7:30 where he's starting. 7:30.
yeah, I think it's 7:30 in the morning or something for him.
Good night.
See you in 15
Good night,
minutes.
Claire.